Ever heard someone call product managers the CEO of the product? It's kind of a catchy phrase that's attracted some people to product management, but it certainly doesn't tell the whole story. In today's discussion, we'll break down where the CEO comparison holds up, where it falls short, and most importantly, what makes product management a uniquely challenging and rewarding role in its own right. Along the way, we'll explore how the role varies across different organizations and discuss the critical skill of defining and managing the boundaries of that product management role. If you're considering how to grow your product management career and your influence, this episode will give you some clarity about what success really looks like in this field. Our guest is Francesca Cortesi, CPO and consultant for some of Europe's multi-billion-dollar brands and fastest-growing businesses. Recently, at Hemnet, Sweden's beloved property platform, she led product development that drove a 130% increase in top-line revenues, making it the growth engine of the business. She now runs her own consultancy, helping CEOs to scale their company by transforming product vision into measurable business growth. If you're listening to our podcast and the great discussion we're about to have and would like to watch us instead, simply go to our YouTube channel. That's Product Mastery Now on YouTube. It's a newer channel, and if you would subscribe, that would certainly help us out. Let's jump in and understand the reality of being the CEO of product right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Francesca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Chad.
I'm delighted to be able to talk. We got introduced to each other through a mutual acquaintance who had been on the podcast before as well, and that was very kind of her to help out. And you have great experience. You have spoken a number of places about product management, so I always appreciate people that are trying to give back to the product management community as they're helping organizations create products that customers love as well. And you've worked with a number of companies and now helping a lot of CEOs scale and grow their organization through a product perspective. And no doubt you probably early in your career came across the CEO of the product sort of phrase. I'm curious how you imagined the role as you were getting into it, and then how you were confronted with reality about what it's really like.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's for me is one of my mission, kind of like to share with the product community a little bit what I thought the role of a product person was and what I realize it is. So that's one of the things that the discussion that actually created more heat in my LinkedIn was, are you the CEO of the product or not? Mm-hmm. And when I started, like back in the days, I want to say like 15 years ago, there was not so much, for the good and the bad, not so much literature about product management, and many times one had to figure out what was one's job without actually like knowing exactly what it was.
Right.
And to be honest, Chad, I don't really know where I read it. But I read this thing that you are in the intersection of business, UX, and tech, and you should act like you are the CEO of the product. And that was at the beginning something that I took with me. And obviously this phrasing can mean many things to different people. And I believe if one wants to think about a positive thing, that the aim of this is that you need to have agency of your choices. Like you have to run things and go through decision and take ownership of what you do. But in reality, what that CEO of the product phrasing did with me is that I thought that my job was to take decisions. And actually, that was something that I realized really, put a not so positive spin in the way that I was interacting with the team. So, for example, because I thought that I needed to take decision, then I was acting at the intersection of the different functions, right? So I thought that my job was to collect input from one side, collect input from the business to understand like the why, to define the problem, and then to transmit that to the team that will like go on and define the how and define the solution, right? So really putting like in different buckets people, and also like having with me that I should gather different inputs, but at the end of the day I'm the CEO of the product, right? So I should be taking the decision, because otherwise we're not getting forward.
Right.
Yeah, well, the more I work with product development, the more I realized how this view was decremental, because actually like obviously, as a product person, as a person in general, you cannot be an expert on all the fields. And even if you're trying to have open ears and open mind, everything you report back is biased by your views. So like by putting yourself in between as a bottleneck, you're actually like creating information bottleneck, and maybe like even changing the perspective of the things that were reported. So that was one thing that I realized, that I was cutting maybe stakeholders out of understanding and how complex it is to build solution in product development, and I was cutting like the team out of understanding how the this business context is complex. So that was one really big learning, and I was like, wait a minute, like there's something here. And then the other part that I also realized is that my job was not at all to being the one like taking decision. I mean, probably one could argue that no CEO is the one taking all the decision either, but that I think it's a lot of the baggage that come with that narrative, like thinking you should be a sole decision maker. Of people disagree, then you have the last word or something like that. When I realized that actually my job was more facilitating discussion and actually understand who has the best position to take those decisions, because I am the one who should make us move forward, not only always the one with all the answers. So that was another realization, that I'm like, this old framing of like CEO of the product that somehow was ingrained in my brain is not really useful for like building product in a collaborative way.
Right. Okay. At this point, I've probably asked a few hundred, if not a few thousand product managers why they became a product manager, right? And the probably the most frequent answers I get back are some aspect of they really do want to create products that customers love. So there's that motivation. They want to have more influence in their organization, and they want to kind of be driving the big picture a little bit more, right? And know what that big picture is. Those last two kind of suggest this aspect of like, well, as a product manager, I'll have more authority. Influence and authority is not the same thing. That's a pretty important distinction we can probably talk about. So as you talk through kind of the difference, that was one key that came out to me was you're not the one sitting in the middle of UX and the business and tech actually making decisions about directions to go. As you said, it's evolved to be more facilitating. That's your personal experience. That probably mirrors a lot of our actual experiences in product. But have you ran into kind of other things that people have misunderstood about the role as you've worked with product managers that don't have quite right? I think this authority issue is probably one of the big ones.
Yeah, I think like there are two things. I've been working with many PMs and mentoring as many. And I think it's like one is I've heard from one PM working with me, when you're in this situation where every one of us has found him or herself, what it's like, it's difficult. You have those decisions that are difficult and like different kind of incitament on the different side of the business, sales and marketing and product and acquisition or growth or retention. Like, and you don't really, I mean, it's hard to come forward, and it's even harder to come forward with like bringing with you everyone. So there I've heard many PMs saying, oh, but I mean, we can just solve this because I'm the CEO of the product, and then I will just like have the authority of like taking that decision, not understanding that the product is much bigger than themselves.
Right.
So that is like also something that goes into decision making and authority, as you were touching. I think I've also heard a lot of people coming to product from other fields and maybe having worked like, I don't know, as developer or as UXer. And one of the reasons why they want to be PM is because they want to decide. So like there is this idea of like taking decision and having the authority of getting us on the other side of the difficult discussion without like spending too much time there. I also sense a lot of frustration, many times from when I work with PMs, where when we are in those difficult situations, that they're not really, I mean, they question who decides. Why can I not decide? Where is the decision? What's my mandate? So there's a lot of that, which obviously it's like part of the difficult part of the job, because you need to be able to drive things forward without many time being anyone's boss, or for that matter, if you're for someone boss, then you don't have the authority of calling the shots for other functions, for example, or for the company strategy in general. So there, I think it's a lot of maybe a little bit of reality check that you have to, you're not the CEO. And even if you were the CEO, you have to work within boundaries.
Right, absolutely. So let's talk about that decision making a little bit more. We should point out, I guess, along the way here, if you do want to become a CEO or a senior leader in an organization, this is not a bad path, right? Because there are a lot of product people who have moved on to the C-suite, including the CEO. And I think a part of that is this issue that we have to figure out that this is a very collaborative role. We work really cross-functionally, but we kind of have to figure out the decision-making authority aspect. I came to product management through a project background, and we were creating products, but no one knew there was a thing called product management, right, or a role about that, and just thought we're managing the project, and I'm out talking to customers and trying to understand what needs to get created. And so I quickly learned as a project manager, like, you have no authority, right? You're there just to help everyone else get the job done. With this kind of being a core issue of it not being the CEO, what have you found that is helpful with that when decisions need to be made and you kind of feel like you're at the middle, maybe being pulled in different directions by the different stakeholders? How do you go about helping with the need to make decisions as a product person?
And you're definitely right when you say, like, obviously, like this, many product people can go up the ladder if they want to.
Right.
And I believe that there is like two key components here that are really important for the product job, that are really important for the C-suite or anyone that has to lead, like, generally. So one, it's the trust capital, right? So I mean, how much you actually are able to make individual around you trust your judgment, or trust that you have the best interest of the company at heart, or trust that you know the strategy, or trust that you're able to see threats, whatever that might be. So it's a deep understanding that I would say come from two things: a deep understanding of the field you're operating within, and the other one is like your ability to work with people, which is the other really important component, which also leads me to think about, like, at the beginning, I really thought that my job as a product person was to convince others of my ideas. Because, right, I had like to make a decision, and then like my job will be to, make the best case, arguing the best case, so everyone will see the same picture as I see, and then we can take the step. When I actually realized that the job is much more about empathizing. It's a lot about understanding where this person, which we assume wants the best for the company, where do they see the opportunity lying, and why is one opportunity better than the other, and evaluating, like, understanding people, creating this trust and the ability of evaluating opportunity. It's a lot what, like, is about product success and business success. So there is where I see that, like, there is ways of working together to come on the other side of this decision. One trick that is not that much of a trick, any really successful product person does this, it's like getting people as early as possible into the process. And I mean, the same way that you will not work into a boardroom and presenting a completely new idea, because then you do not know what to expect. You do not know what they will argue. You start by having pre-meetings and start to massage in the ideas, and then you're more prepared when you actually get to the final presentation. The same is with the pursuing an opportunity, or like working with a solution. Like, start from the beginning to get people's input in. And what this does is, one, it creates the trust that you value their opinion. And two, if everyone contributes, they feel like the solution is theirs. And this is really a key component, especially for products that need go to market, which is basically 99% of the product, because products do not sell by themselves. You will need marketing believing in this. You will need customer support believing in this. You will need sales believing in this. And if you only bring them in at the very last step, when you're like convincing them that this is a good idea, yeah, maybe they will do some work, but you will not get the 100% impact. So it's much more about like collaboratively bringing them in. This doesn't mean that everyone needs to have a saying at every step. This will make us extremely slow. But having like those key competences with you from the beginning, and also like empowering this competence that is like up to them to connect to what is important for their department. They're the voice of their department. I'll ask them to help you co-create something. This is what I've done and when I've seen like things working out successfully.
So the role really is very much about people interactions, right? Facilitating, collaborating. And a lot of us, we move into more responsible roles in our careers without really knowing the people management aspect, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
my background is engineering. Probably at least half of product managers come kind of from a tech background, and others from other roles certainly. But just by nature and how we went through, like when I go through engineering school, I'm looking around, almost everyone's an introvert just like me. And somehow organizations say, hey, you're really good at the work you do. Why don't you now be responsible for these 6 other engineers and lead a team, without any preparation for ever doing that. And you mentioned that you are involved in helping to mentor product managers some too. This is kind of a big issue. How do we learn to be people person and get those skills? What are your thoughts on that?
And I want also to add, not only that, how do we know that is what we like?
Right.
Because that's another thing. I mean, you're completely spot on when we're like next like progression step, like if you go from engineering manager or product manager, like individual contributor, and then maybe you want to be a lead, and then maybe you want to be a head of, and then when you're a VP or a CPO or whatever, those roles are different jobs. I mean, it's like not more of the same, are completely different jobs. And the more like you go up, the less you, and also depending on your organization, obviously, the less you have contact with the product and the more you have to do with people. So I argue that there's always like a people's component in any product role, obviously, because I see the product manager as facilitator. But I think it's really important to start talking about that. Not is like creating different career path, because not everyone wants to be people manager,
Right.
and that's what you end up being if you are there. Back to your question, I think it's really important that we set those expectations. So if we are like, for example, lead, and you take that role, I will have expectation on you not only to deliver on the product goals that we have, but for example, mentoring your people under you, or started to create a strategy that is beyond your product, but is like multi-product or whatever it might be. And those are really different skills. And the very first step, I think it's about expectations. And this is another thing that I think is really complicated in the product world, because even if now there is a lot of literature, there are a lot of books, there are a lot of podcasts as this one that we know where people share their perspective, it's really like the job of a PM is extremely different depending on the context.
Yes.
So there, it's really important to set expectation to start with, to talk with your manager. Okay, what do you expect from me from this role? Having a career step ladder definition where like, okay, here we expect this from you if you do this job, and then having the self control or like self insight, do I like this or not? And if you don't, that's totally fine. It's like not everyone likes to be a people's person, but then I mean, it's like maybe that's not the kind of job that is for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And figuring that out along the way is helpful, and getting the skills that we need, right? The ability to facilitate, to collaborate, this is certainly important. Regarding the role, you mentioned boundaries before and trying to find your boundaries in the role. And you've seen this in different industries, different companies, also different scales of organizations. Can you just talk a little bit about how you've seen the role of product manager be different in different organizations?
For sure. I think obviously the size of the company matters a lot. I mean, I've been working in startups. They are like product. Yeah, you're a product person, so you have like, you're expected to know the product, you're expected to talk with customers, you're expected to know the problem space, but then maybe you're also expected to do customer support. I mean, depending on what it is. Then I've seen like scale ups when you start hiring more and you start getting to the 100, 200 people. There, I think it kicks in another perspective, like to define where goes and if you have like different steps in the hierarchy, if we call it like that, where do the boundaries of the role go? For example, do we divide on the product solution and problem space? Do we divide on the strategic level? Do we divide on the goals level or the portfolio one? I mean, there are different ways of slicing and dicing. I think there's another component to it that, I mean, obviously it depends on your company, it depends on your culture. And also every product manager who is not a new product manager come with a baggage of what the role has meant in the previous company that not necessarily is the same thing that the role means in this new company. So there is where I talk about boundaries and expectation. I've done like many times with the companies that I work for, expectation workshop, for example. And I've done it even like in the same company when the company kick new growth stages, and where like we started to scale and maybe the expectation on the people were different. So where there is a lot about what do I, like I as CPO in that matter, like as your boss expect from you? How are we going to measure this? What are the things that you need to deliver on these things? And what do you need from me to support you in this journey? And I think this can, it's really important. Many times that not is fascinating that when you start sitting with people and gathering their perspective, it's really different views. So there is like start creating, especially if you're in charge of like creating a product org, a common view of what it means to be a PM in this company. What are the expectations that we can expect from each other, and then connect this expectation to the development plan of the individual person. But it's really about, I think sometimes even putting like really, really black and white in details what it means. Like a PM means that I expect you to talk with customers. A PM here means that I expect you to know how we make money from this product. A PM here means that you should have weekly contact with your stakeholders, or whatever it might be. It could be obvious for you, but most likely is not obvious for the other person, because what PM meant in another company or industry was really different. So that I think is like the baseline, to be really clear on expectation. And to your question of the difference of the companies, I mean, I didn't see a lot of, I would say that the difference were more about the company stage than the industries. And if the scope was bigger or smaller depend a lot on how big or small the organization was.
Right. Yeah. It changes a lot with scale. And
yeah.
Interestingly enough, as you talked through that, I was thinking, obviously, I expect like the organizational leaders, they're changing drastically as the organization scales. And I've heard founders talk about the organization is different when there were 3 of us versus just 10, and then going from 10 to 30 and 30 to 100. The structure's changing. There's more processes to do. There's different roles in play. And same is true for product management, certainly would be, right, at different scales. My roles, I started with a startup, and I was technically a startup, but a small group. I was employee number 4, right? And then had been through 2 or 3 startups along the way as well, and then the global organization. And my role's always been over a product, right? Which is, so you encompass everything about that product. And then some time ago, I had an interview on this podcast with a product manager at Microsoft, and they call them program managers, which is just a unusual use of the term if you're coming from a project background. And her role was a feature on the search capability in one of the Office products, right? And just reminded me of at larger scale, you might be a product manager over some aspect of a product where there's literally several hundred features and you're responsible for one of them.
For sure. And then another thing that I want to add is also that I mainly worked for companies where the product is the company,
Right.
meaning like you have
The
a
startup
marketplace.
environment.
Yeah, like, or like, it's not necessarily a startup, but I mean, maybe you have this marketplace for like buying and selling houses. I mean, that is the company. I mean, the major of the revenues come from there, everything is digital, etc. But if you're in another context where the digital channel is not the product, like let's take, for example, a retailer. I don't know, like I'm from Italy, let's take Gucci, for example. I mean, their product is making clothes or making bag or making shoes. Then they also have like a digital component to it. But I mean, how does that fit into how the company works, what the product, the actual product is, and how do we make money out of this channel, and how this contributes to the overall chain of things. That's also like different, a little bit
Yes.
like in parallel, as you were saying. Yeah, the bigger the scale, you might be responsible for the entire product, even a product line, if you're like that startup starts scaling at the beginning. And if you are like in a enterprise environment, then you are responsible for maybe like the checkout button or like a specific functionality, exactly as you were saying. So that's again, like you see the same role title, but really different expectations on the on what you should do every day.
Yeah, yeah. I like the Gucci example because when you're in an environment that has different products, or maybe we're trying to find different channels to reach different market segments or ones that are more effective, there's also the issue that comes up internally where some people might feel the work that you're doing cannibalizes in some way the work that they're doing, and we're competing maybe for the same market share with two different products. And you talked about it, emphasized, at least in my mind as we went through this, like one of the aspects of product manager is that stakeholder engagement. Maybe
sure.
it's the weekly meetings and understanding what their objectives are and what they need to accomplish. And then as a product manager, how do you help make them be successful as well and navigate your way through what can get messy at times, some of the challenges when we feel like part of the organization feels like something new is cannibalizing something we've done in the past. Lots of challenges along the way in this role.
Oh yeah. No one said it was easy.
No one said it was easy, and yet people want to do it. And I think a lot of that is because we do like creating something new that hasn't existed before and creating something that solves the customer's problem and provides them value. Any kind of advice that you would want to make sure product managers hear if they are struggling with some aspect of their role? Things that you shared before I thought were really good was let's define what the role is now, make sure we have a understanding of that. Talk to others, get their reflections on product management as well. Make sure that at least you're doing the things that are expected. But some organizations expect things out of product managers that they really shouldn't, and we get pulled in too many directions. Any other advice on how to kind of help with defining boundaries?
Yeah, another thing that I want to add, and then it's a bit of a trend that I've seen happening, is that because there's so much more talk about product management and literature and books, sometimes I see a tendency of wanting to do things by the book. And then, I mean, obviously, I see all those books. I'm a fan of those books. I mean, I think it's best that we have more knowledge than less knowledge. But as everything, it's really contextual. So, I mean, for some things to have worked in a certain company is because there was a certain culture, because it was a certain management group, there was a certain willingness or not willingness to take risk, a certain amount of people, and so on. So, I mean, another thing when you find yourself stuck in between like expectation that you don't think are right, one part is like obviously talk with your boss, like what is your expectation of me and what I'm supposed to deliver. And the other one is checking like what kind of expectation do you have in your head? Are those expectations coming from something you read or something that you heard worked in another context that maybe you might consider if this is like the right fit for the context where you're in? Because that's also something that I feel it's a mismatch. Like as I was talking before, like if I thought I was the CEO of the product and I wanted to make a decision if we are in a structure where there's like a certain decision making, and with some people expect to be involved, and then that doesn't happen, then you will fall short on expectation because your own expectation is mismatching of what it actually is.
Yep.
So that is also something like, don't think take inspiration from the books, but talk more, I would say, like the really concrete, like define expectation with your manager. Also, I would say call out expectation that you think are unreasonable. Like, for example, if it's like 300 stakeholders meeting a day, and then you also are meant to be with the customers or talk with them. There's just a certain amount of time, so you can do an exercise of like what will make the most impact from your side, and then coming back, like not complaining, but saying, okay, I see these leverage activities. Do you agree with me? Can we align on this? And do we need to find any mitigation for the action that I cannot take? Like showing that you're like have an interest in making an impact, and then define what impact is together. I think it's always like a good starting point. And especially, I'm going to repeat myself here, but not take anything for granted, especially if you are new in the company, or even if the company is changing something. It might be phase of growth or leadership or anything else. I think this is something that we not consider so often, that there is that need of like rethinking, almost exactly the same way we periodically rethink strategy, rethinking if there's any gap in the expectations.
Yep, really good advice. Getting on the same page with your boss and other stakeholders about the expectations, and working on those high value, high impact things. And we probably both think interaction with customers is a pretty big part of the role in high value, high impact. And unfortunately, it's the thing that often gets squeezed out because of all the other things, which is a good thing to go back to and say, okay, am I not doing the thing that really produces the most value? How can I get that back in, and talk to your boss about maybe realigning things a bit?
Or
Excellent.
sometimes I have like to add one thing that I like did, which I'm not proud of, but I learned either like those really good customer insights. You don't take the time for them, or as I did sometimes at the beginning of my career, you don't think that you need them. So you have like this really clear value creation plan, or this really like defined ideas, and you just like, you think that what's expected on you is execute as quick as possible, so it's out, so you can either like raise more money or do whatever you want. I wouldn't do that again. There's always like, the high impact thing to do is define what is your assumption, and at least validate that before it's too late. So again, like not in all culture, in all product cultures, there is this idea that it's so important to talk with users, while that should be a non-negotiable, if you ask me now.
Yeah, I certainly agree as well. And I've heard some weird stories about product managers not being expected to do that. It's like, that's the role. How do we understand what our customers are doing? If we're just relying on sales, this is a whole nother conversation, but that's a good role for the product manager for sure. Excellent. Well, love the information about thinking about what the role actually is, and where the CEO of the product kind of falls short, and key things to think about, and getting on the same page with others in the organization about what the role should be, and creating alignment about what the business is actually trying to do. We also love innovation quotes around here, and I'm going to ask you one for in just a moment. As we've been talking about what this role is like, the one thing that I'm involved in is helping product managers understand how to get better at their craft. And I have a system for that called Rapid Product Mastery, the Rapid Product Mastery Experience. This aligns with how I came to product management, was through a professional association. You talked about there is value in reading things. We have to put that in context, of course. In my case, it was the Product Development and Management Association, PDMA, and they've been around for more than 50 years now. They research this area, they curate knowledge, they create their own knowledge from research. And I found their body of knowledge so very helpful to really fill out some of the blind spots that I had as a product person, that I learned that, found it super valuable. Others wanted to learn about that as well, started teaching them that, and now I just help individuals get grounded in product management through that and through some other bodies of knowledge as well. And it also is a great way to nurture your product managers if you are a product VP or a CPO, to help them gain more confidence. And I just make it easier to get your hands around this body of knowledge. So the Rapid Product Mastery experience really helps with that. You can do it individually or as a group, like a product VP that does want to nurture their product people. You can find out more about that simply by going to productmasterynow.com, same as the podcast name, productmasterynow.com. We all need to be learning more. It's one reason why I do this podcast, because I get to learn from great people like you, Francesca. So much appreciate your experience. Back to the innovation quote. What do you have for us, and what does that mean to you?
Oh, I have one that is like, I think it's really famous, but it goes like this. Success is being able to go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. And it's Churchill who said this. And what I like about this is that it paints this picture that success is not linear, right? That you're gonna fail. And this idea of continuing in your path and in believing in something and adjusting as things like are in front of you, which I really like. And many times we talk about, like, as we share, more people share, we talk about success stories, but there are a lot of failure behind all of these success stories. And I think this quote kind of remind us that, the success is like not giving up and keep on showing up as your best self every day, and then you will get there.
Love that. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes related to this is fall down. I think it's fall down 7 times, get up 8. It's this notion we have to keep going, right? And I love that, without losing your enthusiasm, and just keep pushing forward. Thank you so much for that. How can people find out about the work that you're doing now, about resources you have, reach out to you, and give us a little summary about the work that you're doing as well?
For sure. As you said at the beginning, I have my own advisory company when I specialize in scaling companies. So like in that growth phase, post-market fit. And I have like 2 things. Either you can work with me and I do advisory, I do mentorship, and you can find everything on my website or on LinkedIn. And my website is my name, francescacortesi.com. And there you can also find a lot of free resources, because I like to share. So there is a blog component to it where you can read, and I try to share as much as possible from my own experience and the things as the CEO of the product, what I thought, what I think now, and the evolution of my perspective, which resonates with many as I get comments and heat around those things. So you can find me in either LinkedIn on my website.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure the links are in the show notes for this as well. Francesca, thank you so much for joining us and talking about the role of product management.
Thank you, Chad. It was really fun.
And listeners, if you want to find the written version of everything we discussed, simply go to productmasterynow.com/527. Also, if you would, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Product Mastery Now. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.